Outlive, The Science and Art of Longevity, by Peter Attia, M.D., with Bill Gifford. Introduction. Imagine having a dream that haunts you. Not just once, but night after night, for years. In the dream, you're standing on a dirty city street, holding a padded basket. And from high above, from the rooftops of towering buildings, eggs are falling. One after another, they come hurtling down. Your job is to catch them. You're running, scrambling, your basket outstretched like a baseball glove, trying to save each one before it smacks against the pavement. But they're coming too fast. You catch a few, but many, so many, shatter on the ground, splattering yellow yolk all over your shoes. You feel this rising wave of desperation. Helplessness. No matter how hard you try, no matter how fast you run, you will never be able to catch all the eggs. And then you wake up, heart pounding, another night of precious sleep ruined. This was the dream that tormented Drive. Peter Attia, when he was a surgical resident at Johns Hopkins Hospital, training to become one of the world's elite cancer surgeons. He was at the top of his game, performing incredibly complex operations on patients with the most aggressive cancers. He was getting better and better at catching the eggs. In the operating room, he and his team were miracle workers, removing tumors that other doctors wouldn't touch. But a terrible truth began to dawn on him. The success in the operating room felt hollow. Because even after a perfect surgery, nearly all of these patients would still die within a few years. He was catching the egg, only to watch it hit the ground a little later. He was saving people from a fast death, only to see them succumb to a slow one. He grew so frustrated that he quit medicine entirely. But the dream of the falling eggs never left him. And one day, the real meaning of the dream finally hit him. The only way to solve the problem wasn't to get better at catching the eggs. It was to find a way to get to the top of the building, find the person who was throwing them, and stop them. Today, we're diving into his masterwork, Outlive, The Science and Art of Longevity. This isn't just a book about health, it's a revolutionary new operating manual for how to approach your life. Drive. Attia returned to medicine with a completely new mission, not to treat sickness, but to build a new kind of medicine focused on preventing the diseases of aging before they ever take root. And by the end of our journey today, you'll understand this new framework. You'll know who the 4 horsemen of chronic disease are, why they are the people throwing the eggs from the rooftop, and you'll have the strategic playbook to stop them, so you can not just live longer, but live better for longer than you ever thought possible. Book summary. To understand this new approach, we have to first understand the world we're living in. Peter Attia calls it the age of slow death. For most of human history, we died from fast death. Infections, injuries, childbirth, violence. Life was brutal and often short. A simple cut could lead to a fatal infection. Medicine, for centuries, was mostly guesswork. But in the mid-19th century, something incredible happened. We discovered germs. We developed antibiotics, sanitation, and surgery. We entered the era Attia calls Medicine 2.0. And Medicine 2.0 is a miracle. It's the reason we can fix a broken bone, cure pneumonia, and perform heart transplants. It got incredibly good at pulling people out of the river when they were drowning. But a new problem emerged. As we conquered the causes of fast death, a new set of killers rose to take their place. These are the diseases of aging. The ones that don't kill you overnight, but slowly, over decades. Attia calls them the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Heart disease. Cancer. Neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's. And type 2 diabetes and its related metabolic problems. Odds are, one of these 4 will be the cause of your death. And here is the central failure of Medicine 2.0. It treats these slow, chronic diseases with the same mindset it uses for fast, acute problems. It waits for the disease to show up, for the person to be drowning, and then it tries to intervene. It waits until the eggs are already falling. By the time someone has a heart attack, the disease has likely been building in their arteries for 20 years. By the time a tumor is detectable, it may have been growing silently for a decade. By the time someone is diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, their metabolic health has been declining for a very long time. Medicine 2.0 comes in way too late. Peter Attia realized this wasn't just a professional problem, it was a deeply personal one. After leaving medicine, he found himself, at age 36, on a beach in Catalina after a grueling 21-mile ocean swim. He had just accomplished an incredible feat of endurance. He was an athlete, but as he stood there, his wife turned to him and said, with all the love in the world, "Peter, I think you should work on being a little less not thin." It was a wake-up call. He was 50 pounds overweight. He looked in the mirror and saw a dad bod. But the blood tests were even worse. Despite exercising fanatically, he had become insulin-resistant, the first step on the road to type 2 diabetes. His testosterone was shockingly low. And he knew his family tree was filled with men who had died young from heart disease. He was 36 years old, a new father, and he was on a clear path toward an early, slow death. He was the patient he used to see in the hospital. This moment changed everything. He decided to turn his brilliant, obsessive mind to one problem: how to get off that path. He wasn't going to wait for the eggs to fall. He was going to climb to the rooftop. This is the birth of what he calls Medicine 3.0. Medicine 3.0 is a radical shift in thinking. It's not about waiting for a diagnosis. It's about proactive, preventative medicine that starts now, today, no matter how old you are. It has one primary goal: to extend your health span, not just your lifespan. What's the difference? Lifespan is simple. It's how long you live. Health span is how well you live during those years. Think of the mythical Greek figure Tithonus. He was granted eternal life, but he forgot to ask for eternal youth. So he lived forever, but his body just withered away into a state of endless decay. He had a long lifespan, but a terrible health span. Most of us, if we're honest, are heading for a similar fate. The last 10 years of life, what Attia calls the marginal decade, are often marked by frailty, cognitive decline, and chronic disease. We are alive, but not truly living. Medicine 3.0 aims to change that. It aims to square the curve. Imagine a graph. The horizontal line is your lifespan. The vertical line is your health span, your physical and cognitive function. For most people, that health span line starts to curve downwards in their 40s or 50s, leading to a long, slow decline. Medicine 2.0 might step in at the end and stretch that line a little further to the right, giving you a few more years of low-quality life. Squaring the curve means keeping your health span high for as long as possible, and then having a relatively short, rapid decline at the very end. You live better, for longer, and your marginal decade turns into a bonus decade of vitality. So how do we do it? We have to declare war on the four horsemen. And the first and most fundamental battleground is our metabolism. Attia argues that metabolic dysfunction is the common soil from which the other three horsemen grow. And it often begins silently, in an organ we rarely think about, the liver. He tells a story from his residency about operating on a patient with colon cancer. When they opened him up, they saw his liver. A healthy liver is a deep, gorgeous purple. This man's liver was mottled, orangish, and covered in yellow fat. It looked like a diseased organ from a heavy alcoholic. But the man swore he barely drank. He was one of the early victims of a silent epidemic now known as non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or NAFLD. Today, more than 1 in 4 people on Earth has it. It's the physical manifestation of a body overwhelmed with energy. Think of your body like a bathtub. The water coming from the faucet is the calories you eat. The drain is the energy you burn through activity. For most of our lives, especially if we're not very active, we're pouring more water into the tub than is going down the drain. At first, this is fine. Our subcutaneous fat, the fat under our skin, is like the bathtub itself. It's the safest place to store that extra energy. But everyone's bathtub is a different size. Some people have a huge jacuzzi, others have a tiny bucket. This is largely determined by genetics. When your personal bathtub is full, but the faucet is still running, the water has to go somewhere. It spills over. This fat spillover is where the real trouble begins. The excess energy, in the form of fat, starts accumulating in places it shouldn't be: in your muscles, around your heart, in your pancreas, and especially in your liver. That's NAFLD. It also accumulates as visceral fat, the dangerous fat deep inside your abdomen, between your organs. This isn't just passive storage. Visceral fat actively pumps out inflammatory signals that promote disease. One of the first places this spillover causes problems is in your muscle cells. Tiny fat droplets disrupt the machinery that allows your muscles to take up glucose from your blood. The cells become deaf to the signal of insulin, the hormone that's supposed to shuttle glucose into the cells. This is the very definition of insulin resistance. Your pancreas senses this problem and shouts louder, pumping out more and more insulin to try to force the glucose into the resistant cells. For a while, this works. Your blood sugar might look normal on a test, but your insulin levels are sky high. This state is called hyperinsulinemia, and it's the canary in the coal mine of metabolic disease. Eventually, the pancreas gets exhausted, and the cells become so resistant that your blood sugar starts to rise. First, you have prediabetes. Then, you have full-blown type 2 diabetes. But as Attia stresses, a diabetes diagnosis isn't the beginning of the problem. It's the end of a long process that started years, maybe decades, earlier with that first bit of fat spillover. This entire metabolic mess, from fatty liver to insulin resistance to diabetes, creates the perfect environment for the other horsemen to thrive. The chronic inflammation, high insulin, and high blood sugar are like fertilizer for heart disease, cancer, and Alzheimer's. So, tackling metabolic health is strategy number 1. But how does this connect to the deadliest killer on the planet, heart disease? This is personal for Attia. His family is riddled with men who died of heart attacks in their 40s. So even when he got his own metabolic health in order, he knew he was still at high risk. The conventional wisdom about heart disease, he discovered, is dangerously oversimplified. For decades, we've been told a simple story: there's good HDL cholesterol and bad LDL cholesterol. Eat less saturated fat and cholesterol, keep your LDL low, and you'll be fine. It's the clogged pipe model, like bacon grease going down your kitchen drain. This, Attia says, is almost completely wrong. First, the cholesterol you eat in food has very little to do with the cholesterol in your blood. Your body, mostly your liver, makes the vast majority of it. Cholesterol isn't the villain, it's essential for life. It's used to build every cell membrane in your body and to make critical hormones like testosterone and estrogen. The real issue isn't cholesterol itself, but the boats that transport it through your bloodstream. Since cholesterol is a fat, it can't dissolve in your watery blood. So it gets packaged into particles called lipoproteins. HDL and LDL are just 2 types of these transport boats. The problem isn't the amount of cholesterol cargo in your LDL boats. That's what a standard LDL-C test measures. The problem is the number of LDL boats themselves. Attia uses a brilliant analogy. Imagine a busy street representing your artery. The houses alongside it are the artery wall. The fence in front of each house is a delicate, single-cell layer called the endothelium. The LDL boats are like little cars driving down the street. Atherosclerosis, heart disease, doesn't start because there's too much cargo in each car. It starts when one of those cars crashes through the fence and gets stuck in the front yard. The more cars there are on the street, the higher the probability of a crash. Every one of these potentially dangerous boats has a specific protein on its surface that acts like a license plate, called apolipoprotein B, or APOB. Measuring your APOB level tells you the total number of these dangerous cars on your street. This number, Attia argues, is the single most important metric for assessing your risk of heart disease, far more predictive than a standard cholesterol test. But most doctors still don't routinely test for it. The disease process begins when one of these APOB particles penetrates the endothelium and gets trapped. This triggers an immune response. Macrophages, the cleanup crew of the immune system, rush in to gobble up the trapped particle. They become bloated foam cells, which form a fatty streak. This is the very first stage of an atherosclerotic plaque. And here's the terrifying part. Autopsies of young people who died in accidents show that these fatty streaks can be found in teenagers. Heart disease is a lifelong process. It starts in childhood. Over decades, this process continues. The plaque grows, developing a fibrous cap over a core of lipids and dead cells. Most of the time, this happens silently. But if that cap ruptures, the body forms a blood clot to heal the injury. If that clot is big enough to block the artery, or if it breaks off and travels to the heart or brain, you have a heart attack or a stroke. The most common first symptom of heart disease isn't chest pain. It's sudden death. So, the strategy for defeating horseman number 1 is aggressive, early prevention. It means driving down the number of those APOB particles as low as possible, for as long as possible. The goal, he says, is to get your APOB levels down to what they were when you were a child. This can be done through nutrition, exercise, and for many people, especially those with high genetic risk, medications like statins. But the key is to start thinking about it in your 30s and 40s, not your 60s. The 10-year risk horizon of Medicine 2.0 is far too short. We need to be playing a lifelong game. What about cancer, the runaway cell? This was Attia's original field, and his frustration with it is palpable. The war on cancer, declared over 50 years ago, has been a humbling failure. For most major cancers, death rates have barely budged. Why is cancer so hard to beat? First, it's not one disease, it's thousands. A breast cancer from one woman is genetically completely different from the breast cancer of the woman in the next room. And second, we almost always find it too late. So Attia's strategy for cancer has 3 parts: prevention where possible, much better early detection, and more targeted treatments. The low-hanging fruit for prevention, he argues, is right back where we started: metabolic health. We know from the work of scientists like Otto Warburg in the 1920s that cancer cells have a voracious, almost insane appetite for glucose. They metabolize it differently than healthy cells, in a way that generates building blocks for rapid growth. High levels of insulin and its cousin, insulin-like growth factor IGF-1, act like rocket fuel for many types of cancers. Obesity is a leading risk factor for at least 13 different types of cancer. So, keeping your metabolic health in check, avoiding insulin resistance and hyperinsulinemia, is a core part of an anti-cancer strategy. It's about not creating a fertile environment for cancer cells to grow. But what about early detection? This, Attia believes, is where the next great revolution will happen. Right now, our screening tools are clumsy. A standard scan can't see a tumor until it's about 1 centimeter in diameter. But a 1 centimeter tumor already contains about a billion cells. That's not early. The future is in liquid biopsies. These are blood tests that can detect tiny fragments of DNA shed by cancer cells, called cell-free DNA. This technology is advancing at an incredible pace. Tests like the Gallery test can now screen for over 50 types of cancer from a single blood draw. They can not only tell you that cancer is present, but often identify where in the body it is. The goal is to find cancer when it's just a few million cells, not a billion. When it's small, localized, and far more treatable. Catching cancer at stage 1 or 2 instead of stage 4 is the difference between a high chance of survival and a near-certain death sentence. And what about treatments? Attia is most excited about immunotherapy, the idea of harnessing our own immune system to fight cancer. The story of James D'Angelo, the man whose metastatic stomach cancer vanished on its own, showed that the body sometimes can defeat cancer. Immunotherapy drugs like checkpoint inhibitors essentially unmask cancer cells, allowing our T cells, the assassins of the immune system, to recognize and destroy them. This is what saved former President Jimmy Carter from metastatic melanoma. The combination of radically better, earlier detection and more powerful, targeted immunotherapies offers the first real hope in decades that we might finally start winning the war against this horseman. The third horseman is perhaps the most feared: neurodegenerative disease, and specifically Alzheimer's. More than cancer or heart disease, people fear losing their minds, their memories, their very self. Attia tells the story of a 40-year-old patient named Stephanie. She came to him healthy, just interested in longevity, but a routine genetic test revealed a devastating piece of news. She had 2 copies of the APE4 gene variant, which meant her lifetime risk of developing Alzheimer's disease was up to 12 times higher than the average person's. She was terrified. For decades, the story of Alzheimer's was dominated by the amyloid hypothesis. The idea was that the disease is caused by the buildup of sticky plaques of a protein called amyloid beta in the brain. Billions of dollars have been spent on developing drugs to clear these plaques. And every single one of them has failed to stop or even slow the disease's progression. This catastrophic failure has forced a rethinking. What if amyloid plaques aren't the cause, but a consequence of the disease? Or maybe just one factor among many? 2 new theories are emerging that offer more hope for prevention. The first is the vascular hypothesis. It suggests that Alzheimer's is, at its root, a disease of the brain's blood supply. The brain is an incredibly energy-hungry organ, consuming 20% of our body's oxygen despite being only 2% of its weight. Anything that impairs blood flow, atherosclerosis in the tiny vessels of the brain, high blood pressure, inflammation, creates a neuronal energy crisis. The neurons begin to starve. This, the theory goes, is what triggers the cascade of cell death and plaque formation. In short, what's good for the heart is good for the brain. The second theory is the metabolic hypothesis. There's a powerful link between type 2 diabetes and Alzheimer's, so much so that some scientists have called Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes. The brains of Alzheimer's patients show a profound inability to use glucose for fuel. Insulin resistance in the body is mirrored by insulin resistance in the brain. This energy crisis, again, leads to cell death. The APE4 gene seems to make everything worse. It's involved in cholesterol transport in the brain, it's linked to poorer glucose metabolism, and it promotes inflammation. For people like Stephanie, these metabolic and vascular risk factors are even more dangerous. So, the strategy against this horseman is, once again, early and aggressive prevention, starting decades before any symptoms appear. It means optimizing cardiovascular health to ensure robust blood flow to the brain. It means optimizing metabolic health to keep the brain's fuel supply lines open. And the single most powerful tool for this? Exercise. Study after study shows a powerful link between cardiorespiratory fitness and reduced risk of dementia. Exercise improves glucose metabolism, reduces inflammation, and promotes the growth of new neurons. Attia says it is, full stop and hands down, the best tool we have in the neurodegeneration prevention toolkit. So, we have our objective, a long, vibrant health span. And we have our strategy, a proactive, lifelong war against the four horsemen, with a special focus on metabolic health. Now, what are the tactics? What do we actually do? This is where Attia introduces his master framework, the centenarian decathlon. He asks you to imagine yourself in your last decade of life. Your 90s, or maybe even your 100s. What 10 physical tasks do you want to be able to do? These aren't Olympic events. They are the events of life. Maybe one event is lifting up your great-grandchild. Another is being able to get up off the floor by yourself. Carrying 2 bags of groceries up a flight of stairs. Hiking a 1.5 miles on your favorite trail. Playing with your dog. This becomes your personal decathlon. It's your specific, tangible goal for your health span. And once you have that goal, you can work backward to figure out how you need to train for it today. To be able to lift a 30-pound grandchild at age 90, you have to account for the natural decline in strength that happens with age. That means you need to be significantly stronger today than you think. You're not just training for now. You are building a reserve of strength and capacity to draw upon for the rest of your life. Strength training is a form of retirement saving. Attia breaks down exercise into 4 key pillars. 1. Strength. This is the foundation. He emphasizes functional movements that translate to real life. Grip strength so you can open a jar, pulling motions, and hip hinging movements like deadlifts and squats so you can get out of a chair. 2. Stability. This is the forgotten pillar. It's about neuromuscular control, teaching your brain and body to work together to transmit force safely and efficiently. It's about moving like we did when we were babies, before years of sitting in chairs taught us bad habits. It's the key to preventing the injuries that so often derail people as they age. 3. Aerobic efficiency zone 2 training. This is low-intensity cardio, like a brisk walk or a light jog where you can still hold a conversation. This type of training is the absolute best for improving the health of your mitochondria, the tiny power plants in your cells. Healthy mitochondria are crucial for metabolic flexibility, the ability to burn both fat and glucose for fuel. Attia recommends 3 to 4 hours of Zone 2 training per week. 4. Peak aerobic fitness VO2 max training. VO2 max is a measure of your body's maximum capacity to utilize oxygen. It is one of the most powerful markers for longevity. The data is stunning. Having an elite VO2 max for your age and sex is associated with a 5-fold lower risk of death than someone in the bottom 25%. You train this with short, all-out interval workouts, like 4 minutes at the highest sustainable pace you can manage, followed by 4 minutes of recovery, repeated several times. This 4-part framework ensures you're training not just for one event, but for the entire decathlon of life. Next, nutrition. Attia calls his approach Nutrition 3.0. It is not a diet. It is a personalized framework based on nutritional biochemistry. He avoids the religious wars of vegan versus keto versus carnivore. Instead, he focuses on 3 levers you can pull. 1. Caloric restriction (CR). How much you eat. This is the most powerful lever for metabolic health and weight management, but it's hard to stick to because it requires constant tracking. 2. Dietary restriction (Dr.). What you eat or don't eat. This is what most diets are. You eliminate a category of food, like carbohydrates or animal products. This can be effective, but only if it creates a sustainable caloric deficit without compromising essential nutrients. 3. Time restriction when you eat. This includes intermittent fasting. Attia finds this to be the least effective tool for most people, as it's very easy to overeat in your feeding window and it can make it difficult to get enough protein. His core principles are simple. First, get away from the standard American diet of ultra-processed foods. Second, make sure you are getting enough protein, around 1 gram per pound of your body weight per day, to preserve muscle mass as you age. This is critical. Third, use technology like a continuous glucose monitor (CGM) to understand how your body responds to different foods. This allows for true personalization, moving beyond guesswork to data. The third tactic is sleep. Attia used to be a sleep hater, a sleep when I'm dead kind of guy. He tells a terrifying story of falling asleep at the wheel after a 60-hour shift and waking up 6 hours later in the middle of a park known as an open-air drug market. He now calls sleep the best medicine for your brain. Poor sleep, even for one night, wreaks havoc on your metabolism, causing profound insulin resistance. It cripples your immune system, raises your blood pressure, and disrupts the hormones that control hunger. And most importantly, deep sleep is when your brain cleans itself. A system called the glymphatic system flushes out metabolic waste, including amyloid beta. Chronic poor sleep is a powerful risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. The prescription is 7.5 to 8.5 hours of high-quality sleep per night. He offers a toolkit of strategies: a cool, dark room, no screens before bed, avoiding alcohol, and getting morning sunlight to set your circadian rhythm. But as Attia's journey continued, he discovered there was a final, crucial piece of the longevity puzzle. It was the one he had been ignoring his whole life. He had become a master of his physical health. He had hacked his diet, his exercise, his sleep. He was the picture of health. But inside, he was miserable. He was driven by a relentless, simmering anger. He was a perfectionist, obsessed with achievement, but it was all fueled by a deep-seated insecurity and self-loathing. His relationships were crumbling. He was emotionally detached from his wife and children. He tells a heartbreaking story. He was away on a work trip when his wife called. Their 1-month-old son had stopped breathing. She had performed CPR and saved his life. When she told him this story, his first, unthinking response was not empathy or relief, but a cold, clinical question. "Okay, so what do you need me to do?" He was broken. His journey into emotional health took him to 2 inpatient treatment centers, where he was forced to confront the source of his pain: severe childhood trauma. He had buried it for decades, adapting to it by building a fortress of achievement and rage. But the fortress had become a prison. This is where Outlive transcends a typical health book and becomes something much deeper. Attia argues that emotional health is the most important component of healthspan. Longevity is meaningless if you are miserable. And that misery can destroy your physical health just as surely as any of the 4 horsemen. Through intense therapy, using frameworks like dialectical behavior therapy (DBT), he learned the tools to regulate his emotions, to build distress tolerance, and to reframe his self-destructive thoughts. He learned to distinguish between his resume virtues, the accomplishments he could list on his CV, and his eulogy virtues, the things people would say about him after he was gone. He realized he had spent his entire life collecting the former, at the expense of the latter. His quest for longevity had been driven by a fear of death. But through this painful work, his perspective shifted. It was no longer about hacking biology to avoid an endpoint. It became about enriching the experience of being alive, right now. It became about connection, purpose, and love. He was no longer just trying to outlive death. He was learning how to truly live. Commentary. When you finish a book like Outlive, it's hard to see the world in the same way again. It's one of those rare works that doesn't just give you information, it fundamentally changes your relationship with your own life. The most powerful lesson, for me, is the radical shift in responsibility. Peter Attia's entire philosophy is built on moving from being a passive passenger in your own health journey to becoming the captain of the ship. Medicine 2.0, our current system, treats us like passengers. We go about our lives, and when the ship hits an iceberg, a heart attack, a cancer diagnosis, we call for help, and the medical establishment rushes in to patch the holes. Medicine 3.0 says, you are the captain. It's your job to study the maps, to watch the radar, to see the icebergs on the horizon, and to steer a new course long before you're in any danger. This is an incredibly empowering idea. It means we are not helpless victims of our genes or of aging. Our longevity is far more malleable than we think. The second profound insight is the interconnectedness of it all. In our siloed world, we think of heart disease as a plumbing problem, cancer as a genetic lottery, and Alzheimer's as a cruel mystery. Attia masterfully shows how they are all deeply intertwined, often growing from the common root of metabolic dysfunction. This is incredibly hopeful. It means that the actions we take to improve our metabolic health, through exercise, nutrition, and sleep, aren't just fighting one disease. They are a multi-front war against all four horsemen simultaneously. The things you do to lower your risk of diabetes also lower your risk of cancer and Alzheimer's. There is an incredible elegance and efficiency to this approach. So, where do you start? It can feel overwhelming. But Attia's framework is designed to be built brick by brick. Here are 3 simple, practical actions you can take today, inspired by the book. First, just start moving, but with a specific goal. Go for a brisk 45-minute walk. The intensity should be such that you can still hold a conversation, but just barely. This is zone 2. Don't worry about heart rate monitors or lactate meters. Just find that conversational pace. You have just taken your first step in building a healthier mitochondrial foundation. Second, perform a simple thought experiment. Sit down for 10 minutes and write down your own centenarian decathlon. What are the 10 physical things you want to be able to do with ease and joy in your 90s? Don't censor yourself. Be ambitious. Do you want to be able to travel? To dance at your great-grandchild's wedding? To carry your own luggage? This isn't a fitness plan. It's a vision for your future self. It gives your efforts today a powerful why. Third, for the next week, simply observe your sleep. Don't try to fix it. Just notice. When do you go to bed? When do you wake up? How do you feel in the morning? This simple act of observation, without judgment, is the first step toward understanding one of the most powerful levers you have for your health. Outlive is more than a book, it's a manifesto. It's a call to action to stop being passive recipients of our fate and to become the active architects of our future. It's a reminder that the ultimate goal isn't just to add years to our life, but to add life to our years. That was a summary of Outlive, The Science and Art of Longevity by Peter Attia, MD. We've touched on the major themes today, but I have to be honest with you, a summary is like looking at a travel brochure for the Grand Canyon. It can show you the pictures, but it can never replicate the feeling of standing on the edge, feeling the wind, and seeing the sheer scale of it for yourself. The real magic of this book happens when you read it. It's in the quiet moments when one of Attia's stories or a particular scientific insight connects with your own life in a way you didn't expect. This summary is your map, designed to help you decide if this is a journey you want to take. If anything we've talked about today has sparked a fire in you, I encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning facts, it's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see your health, your future, and your daily life. The link to the book is in the description. Also, if you found this summary valuable, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It lets us know we're on the right track and ensures you won't miss our next deep dive into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep learning and growing together.